Have you ever felt invisible? In a room where you once felt adored? Where her eyes used to light up at the sound of your voice, but now barely flicker when you speak? Where her words once built you up, but now subtly cut you down, one suggestion, one delay, one cold shrug at a time? This is not heartbreak. This is erosion, slow, silent, and lethal to your self-worth. And yet, many men stay. They stay, not because they're weak, but because they've been conditioned to ignore the signs, to rationalize disrespect, to mistake emotional neglect for independence, to believe that if they just try a little harder, she'll become who she used to be. But she won't, because she's already telling you, in her tone, her absence, her words, she's no longer interested. She just doesn't want to say it directly. And you, the Stoic man in training, must learn to read beneath the words, to recognize when love is no longer being offered, so you can walk away with your dignity intact before your soul starts bargaining for crumbs. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." In relationships, the moment you abandon your standards to keep her interested, you've already lost something far greater than her affection, yourself. This video isn't about becoming paranoid. It's not about assuming every miscommunication is a sign of doom. It's about awakening a sharper perception. It's about tuning your inner compass to discern disrespect disguised as modern love. Because you don't need to be yelled at to be devalued. Sometimes it comes wrapped in delayed texts, feigned busyness, and jokes that sting a little too often. What we're going to uncover today are the 10 subtle but clear things a woman says when she's mentally and emotionally checked out, and what you, as a man living by Stoic principles, must do when you hear them. We are not here to attack anyone. We're here to reclaim self-respect, to walk the harder path, the one where you don't settle for half love, where you stop trying to convince someone to stay, and instead learn to choose yourself first. Because the most dangerous betrayal is not what she says, but what you ignore. Stay with me until the end of this video, not just to protect yourself in love, but to learn how to walk away, not in bitterness, but in power. Your freedom begins with awareness. Let's begin. Warning sign number 1. Constant control equals a quiet death of respect. You start by letting her pick the restaurant. You think, it's no big deal. Next time you let her decide where you'll go on vacation, then what you'll wear, then who you can or can't talk to. And before you know it, you're no longer deciding anything, you're just complying. It doesn't feel like control at first, it feels like compromise. It feels like keeping the peace. But slowly, subtly, what used to be a partnership becomes a one-woman dictatorship. And the price you pay is your self-respect. Marcus Aurelius warned us, you should not give circumstances the power to rouse anger, for they don't care at all. But this isn't about anger, it's about erosion. Control doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it wears a smile. You say yes to avoid the argument. You nod even when you disagree. You apologize for things you didn't do, just to stop the tension from growing. But here's the hard truth, brother. If your opinion no longer matters, your presence will soon follow. In a healthy relationship, both voices are heard. Both needs matter, both dreams are honored. But when a woman consistently demands that everything be done her way, where you eat, who you see, how you speak, even how you feel, that's not intimacy. That's control wearing the mask of high standards. And if you allow it, you teach her that your boundaries don't exist. You stop showing up as a man. You become what the Stoics warned against, a puppet of external forces. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But how can you master yourself when you're not even allowed to lead your own life? Control creeps in under the guise of care. I just want what's best for us. I know you're bad at decisions. If you loved me, you'd do this. These aren't statements of love, they're manipulations designed to chip away at your agency. And the danger isn't just that you'll feel smothered. It's that you'll stop trusting your own judgment. You'll stop choosing, you'll stop thinking. And worst of all, you'll stop standing. And here's the paradox. The more you surrender, the less she respects you. The less she respects you, the colder she grows. And suddenly, the very control you thought would bring closeness becomes the wedge that pushes her away. Because no one, not even the one demanding it, is attracted to someone they can dominate. Control kills polarity. It kills mystery. And eventually, it kills love. So ask yourself, is your voice heard in this relationship? Are your boundaries respected? Do your opinions carry weight, or are you just following her script? If the answer shakes you, if deep down you know that your soul is slowly suffocating in silence, then it may be time to reclaim yourself. Not with rage, not with drama, but with clarity. The Stoic man doesn't fight for control. He simply refuses to surrender his integrity. So, if you find yourself in a relationship where everything must go her way, where your input is dismissed, where your decisions are mocked, where your autonomy is slipping quietly out the back door, don't wait for her to hand your power back. Walk, not in anger, but in honor. Because the moment you reclaim your boundaries, you reclaim your worth. And that's the first step back to yourself. Warning sign number 2, guilt tripping. When love turns into a weapon, it starts small. You cancel dinner plans because of work. And she says, if I really mattered, you'd have made time. You go out with friends after a long week and she says, must be nice to matter more than me. And suddenly, you're not just explaining your choices, you're apologizing for being yourself. This is the slow poison of guilt tripping. Not overt rage, not direct blame. Just that quiet, gnawing message. You're never doing enough, and everything wrong is your fault. Stoicism teaches us, man is disturbed not by things, but by the view he takes of them. But what happens when someone plants that view inside you, day after day, until it becomes your inner voice? When you're constantly made to feel that your actions, no matter how reasonable, are selfish, hurtful, or inadequate, you begin to believe it. You start over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-compensating. And one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself. You've become the man who tiptoes, who bends backwards, who sacrifices authenticity for approval. Because every time you try to stand firm, she twists your conscience like a lever. That's the dangerous brilliance of guilt tripping. It doesn't control you through anger, it controls you through shame. You begin to feel guilty for needing space, guilty for having boundaries, guilty and for wanting a life outside of her. But let's be clear, guilt is a signal, not a sentence. When used with integrity, it points us to real wrongs, things we must own, amend, and learn from. But when weaponized, guilt becomes a tool of manipulation, a way to dominate without raising a voice, to break your confidence without breaking a single rule. She'll never say, I control you. She doesn't have to. She just needs you to feel bad for being you. And the deeper tragedy, you start becoming the version of yourself she already believes you are. Forgetful, selfish, wrong. This is not love. This is quiet coercion. Because true love doesn't manipulate. It communicates. It invites growth, not submission. It holds you accountable with grace, not condemnation. A Stoic relationship is rooted in reason and virtue, not emotional blackmail. It welcomes ownership from both sides. It seeks resolution, not domination. So here's the Stoic test. When you make a mistake, do you feel safe to admit it? When you're honest, is your vulnerability honored or weaponized? When you say no, does she guilt you until you say yes? Because if every disagreement ends with you feeling like the villain, if her pain always becomes your fault, if your boundaries trigger punishment, you're not in a relationship. You're in a manipulation loop. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." But brother, that also means, don't waste your life being guilted into submission. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to have limits, and you are allowed to say, that's not mine to carry. A woman who truly loves you will want your strength, not your surrender. So when guilt becomes a leash, and you find yourself constantly apologizing for simply being who you are. It's time to pause, to reflect, and perhaps to walk, not out of resentment, but out of respect for her, for the truth, and most of all, for yourself. Because no one gets to decide your worth, especially not through guilt. Warning sign number 3, infidelity. When the heart leaves before the body. Does infidelity is never just a mistake. It's a signal, a flare in the night sky, revealing something much deeper has already broken. Trust, connection, respect. Before she ever crosses the line physically, she's already crossed it emotionally. And often, long before you find out, she's been gone. Not gone from your apartment, but gone from the relationship, from commitment, from you. You see, betrayal doesn't begin in the bedroom, it begins in the withholding. The texts that go unanswered, the conversations that feel forced, the intimacy that fades into excuses, the laughter that used to be shared, now reserved for someone else. And you start to feel it, something's off, but you can't explain it. You try harder, you give more, you stay loyal, all while her eyes drift further into the distance. Stoicism doesn't teach us to panic when betrayal strikes. It teaches us to see it for what it is, a mirror. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, not to be right." But what happens when someone stops seeking truth, stops caring what's right, when loyalty becomes inconvenient, and they choose escape over effort? That's when infidelity happens. It's not just about sex. It's about avoidance, avoiding honest conversation, avoiding responsibility, avoiding the work it takes to repair what's cracked. And yet, the moment you confront it, the excuses will pour in. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely. You weren't there. But don't be fooled. Infidelity is not about your shortcomings. It's about her choices. You could have been the most supportive, loving, committed man, and it still wouldn't have stopped someone already looking for an exit. Stoic wisdom doesn't teach us to seek revenge or spiral in self-blame. It teaches us discernment, to see betrayal not just as a wound, but as data. Painful, yes, but clear. And clarity is freedom. Because here's the truth. A woman who truly loves you may get frustrated. She may struggle, she may even hurt, but she will not betray. She will choose hard conversations over secrets. She will stay in the fire, not escape through another's arms. So if she cheats, emotionally or physically, it means something inside her has already walked out the door. And if that's true, why are you still standing in the threshold, begging her to come back? A Stoic man does not beg. He does not chase shadows. He observes, reflects, and then he acts, not with bitterness, but with honor. Because betrayal is not your identity. It's simply a moment that reveals character, hers and yours. You can stay, but only if trust can be rebuilt with actions, not apologies. And if it can't, then your path is clear, because no matter how deep the history, no matter how intense the memories, your dignity is worth more. Remember, you are not defined by someone's failure to love you well. You are defined by how you respond when they don't. So if she breaks the bond that held you together, don't crumble, stand, recenter, and walk toward the man you were meant to become. Warning sign number 4, when you're no longer heard, and she only talks about herself. Have you ever sat across from someone you care about and felt utterly alone? Not because of silence, but because your words float in the air and vanish. Because every time you open your mouth to speak, the subject spins back to her. Her day, her drama, her emotions, her world, and you become invisible in your own relationship. That's not love. That's a monologue disguised as connection. In a truly healthy bond, conversation is a rhythm, a give and take, like a dance. But when one person only takes the lead and never gives you space to step forward, you begin to fade, not just from her attention, but from your own sense of worth. You begin to doubt yourself. Maybe what I feel doesn't matter. Maybe my voice isn't worth hearing. Maybe I'm just here to support, not to be seen. But the truth, you're not crazy. You're experiencing emotional neglect dressed in casual indifference, a kind of soft cruelty that doesn't leave bruises, but erodes your confidence slowly, like water on stone. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." But here's the question. What happens when your goodness is always unheard? When your efforts are unnoticed? When your thoughts are dismissed while hers dominate every room? That's when you must pause and ask, am I in a relationship or an audience? Because real connection isn't built on constant applause for one person. It's built on presence, listening, mutual interest. But when every conversation becomes a mirror reflecting only her, there's no space left for your truth. And over time, that dynamic becomes toxic. You stop sharing. You stop opening up. You stop expecting her to care. And worst of all, you start shrinking your world to fit hers. A Stoic man doesn't play small. He knows his thoughts matter, his voice carries weight. And relationships, true relationships, require reciprocity. This kind of emotional imbalance often hides behind charm. She may not yell, she may not criticize, but her self-centeredness speaks louder than any insult. She doesn't ask how you're doing. She doesn't remember what matters to you. And when you're struggling, she talks about her own stress. This isn't partnership, it's performance, and the cost? Your silence. But here's the Stoic reminder. You are not here to beg for attention. You are not here to shrink yourself to avoid being a burden. You are not here to applaud someone who refuses to hear your applause. You are here to live with integrity, to be seen, heard, felt, and to offer the same in return. So if your words are always overshadowed, if you feel more alone beside her than you do by yourself, don't ignore it. That's not connection, that's consumption. And you deserve more than being someone's emotional mirror. You deserve someone who listens, truly, who asks, "How are you?" and means it, who makes space for your stories, not just their spotlight, because love is not loud, but it listens. Warning sign number 5, constant criticism, when admiration turns into contempt. In the beginning, she smiled when you spoke. She leaned in when you shared your ideas. She admired your strength, your discipline, even the way you sipped your morning coffee. But somewhere along the way, that admiration turned into something colder, sharper, more cynical. Now, every word out of your mouth is an invitation for correction. Every action, a mistake waiting to be pointed out. Every flaw, magnified under a microscope of discontent. And what hurts more is not the words she says, but the absence of the man she used to see in you. The Stoics taught us this. We are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of them. Epictetus. So what happens when the person closest to you changes the way they see you? What happens when they stop seeing your efforts and only see your errors? You wake up to criticism in the morning. You're met with sighs when you speak. You hear the disappointment in her voice not because of what you did, but simply because of who you are. This is not about healthy feedback. This is not about growth. This is about slow erosion. A man begins to question himself. Was that really dumb? Did I actually mess that up? Maybe I'm just not good enough. But let me remind you, a Stoic man doesn't allow his self-worth to be carved out by someone else's discontent. He knows criticism that comes without compassion is not love. It's control. And when a woman no longer admires you, when she no longer sees your strengths but instead builds a case against you, day after day, that is not partnership. That is warfare disguised as intimacy. Criticism becomes a reflex. She mocks how you walk, corrects how you speak, disregards your wins, and scoffs at your struggles. Even your silence becomes ammunition. You can't win, because she's not looking for harmony. She's looking for superiority. And here's what's most dangerous. When you accept this treatment long enough, you begin to shrink. You start tiptoeing around your own life, editing who you are just to avoid another jab. You lose your edge, your certainty, your fire. But the Stoics knew, no one can rob you of your dignity unless you hand it to them. You must ask yourself, am I being challenged, or am I being diminished? Is this helping me grow, or is this keeping me small? Real connection doesn't come from tearing each other down. It comes from seeing the best in each other, even when we fall short. A woman who loves you will still see your flaws, but she won't weaponize them. She will speak truth, but with kindness. She will correct, but never crush. If she only speaks to your weaknesses, but never to your strengths, it's not love. It's quiet contempt. And you deserve better than to live under a constant audit. You deserve encouragement, respect, mutual elevation. So if you feel like everything you do is wrong, like nothing is ever good enough, pause, reflect, and remember this. You were never meant to beg for admiration, especially from someone who once gave it freely. Sometimes, the greatest act of strength is to walk away from someone who only knows how to belittle what others once praised. Congratulations. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most men. Most ignore the signs. You chose awareness. You chose strength. You chose to look at your reality with clarity, and that takes courage. Before we continue, if this message has helped you see things more clearly, support the channel by hitting that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with a friend who might need it. Because wisdom isn't just for keeping, it's for passing on. Now, let's continue. Warning sign number 6. She talks about her ex when the past still lives in the present. You're on a dinner date. She's smiling, the candles are flickering, and just as you think you're connecting, she mentions him. Again, the ex-boyfriend, the crazy one, the one who didn't understand her, the one who did this or never did that. At first you brush it off. Everyone has a past, right? But then it happens again and again, until the ghost of that man is sitting right there at the table with you. The Stoics taught us to live in the present. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The present moment is all we have. Waste it, and you waste your life." So ask yourself, if she can't leave the past where it belongs, is she truly here with you? When a woman constantly talks about her ex, it's not just awkward, it's revealing. It tells you that the emotional tie hasn't been severed. It tells you that something unresolved still occupies space in her heart and in her mind. And here's the painful truth. If her ex still lives in her conversations, he likely still lives in her comparison, in the way she sees you, in the silent judgments she makes without ever saying your name. You become a shadow of a former story, cast into a script you didn't write. This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about insecurity. This is about awareness. Because a Stoic man doesn't enter a relationship to compete with ghosts. He doesn't build a future with someone who hasn't buried the past. It's not about demanding silence. It's about recognizing patterns. If she constantly reminisces about her past, the good, the bad, the traumatic, it's a sign she hasn't healed. She's still sorting through her history, and if you're not careful, she'll use you as the emotional landfill for all the baggage he left behind. And here's what that creates. You stop being a man. You become a therapist, an emotional project, a stand-in for unfinished business. Stoicism reminds us, you are not here to be someone's distraction from pain. You are here to live in truth, in clarity and strength. And if her past is louder than your present, you are not in a relationship. You are in a rerun. You deserve someone who sees you, not who you remind her of. Someone who listens when you speak, not someone waiting to tell another story about him. So what do? You don't confront in anger. You don't accuse or shame. You observe. You ask, do I feel seen? Do I feel like a priority? Am I building something real or patching something broken? If the answer is silence, comparison, or confusion, then the Stoic answer is clear. Walk away with dignity. Not because you hate her, but because you love yourself more than to be someone's second chapter when you were meant to write your own book. Warning sign number 7. She's always busy. Her priorities have shifted. At first, it was magical. Every text was answered. Every weekend was yours. Every hour felt like an invitation to something more. But slowly, the rhythm changes. The good morning texts fade into silence. Your calls go to voicemail. Plans get postponed. And suddenly, you find yourself staring at a screen, rereading messages that once mattered, now ignored. She's just busy, right? Work, family, friends, life happens. But let me ask you this. Is it life that's keeping her away? Or is it choice? Because the truth is brutal, but clear. People make time for what they value. If she wanted to talk to you, she would. If she wanted to see you, she'd find a way. And if she wanted to build something real, she wouldn't keep rescheduling the foundation. The Stoics believed in observing behavior, not promises. In actions, not intentions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The same applies to love. Don't waste time interpreting what love should look like. Look at what it actually is. A woman who is always too busy is telling you something. Not through her words, but through her absence. She's telling you that her priorities have changed, that the fire that once burned brightly is now just a flicker behind a crowded to-do list. And while life does get chaotic, you've seen this pattern before. She's not too busy for her friends, not too busy for her favorite show, not too busy to post stories on social media, just too busy for you. It hurts. But pain, when viewed through the Stoic lens, becomes information. Not judgment, not resentment, just truth. You're not angry. You're awake. Because here's what most men do when they sense this shift. They chase, they plead, they send longer texts, offer more time, try harder, love louder. Thinking maybe, just maybe, that will win her attention back. But the Stoic man doesn't chase time that's not being offered. He doesn't fight for a seat in someone else's life when there's no room left at the table. He doesn't beg to be a priority. He becomes his own, and in doing so, he reclaims his power. So what do you do when she's always busy? You don't argue, you don't accuse, you observe, you step back, you let absence speak its truth. If she reaches out, good. If she doesn't, you've already begun the process of letting go with dignity, because love is not built on convenience, it's built on mutual investment. And if she's no longer showing up for you, then maybe it's time to start showing up for yourself. You don't need to beg for time. You need to build a life so full, so focused, so grounded in purpose, that no one else's absence can shake your foundation. That's the Stoic path. That's self-respect in motion. So if she says she's too busy, listen. And instead of waiting for her to make time for you, go make your time meaningful. Because when someone stops showing up, it's your cue to show yourself the way out. Warning sign number 8, frequent drama. You're living in a storm that's not yours. Have you ever felt like you're constantly walking on eggshells? Like the smallest comment could trigger an argument. A missed call could spark suspicion. A joke could turn into a full-blown interrogation. This is not love. It's an emotional battlefield. And unless you recognize it early, you'll be drafted into a war that was never yours to fight. The Stoics warned against this, against giving your peace away to the chaos of others. Epictetus said, "Keep your will in harmony with nature, and no force can touch you." But when you're with someone who thrives on conflict, who magnifies every misunderstanding and weaponizes emotion to keep you off balance, you lose that harmony. You lose yourself. It starts subtly. A raised voice here, a passive-aggressive jab there, a quiet moment turned cold just because you didn't respond the way she expected. Suddenly you're apologizing for things you didn't do. You're explaining jokes, justifying silences, defending your tone, your timing, your very presence. This is what Stoicism calls being ruled by externals, and the more you engage, the more it pulls you under. Emotional drama, when constant, is not passion. It's not intensity. It's instability. A relationship built on chaos doesn't sharpen you. It erodes you. One moment she's laughing, the next she's accusing. One day she adores you, the next she says you never cared. And you, trying to be the stable one, begin to bend, to over-explain, to compromise your own standards just to keep the peace. But here's the Stoic truth. You are not responsible for managing someone else's emotional volatility. You can be calm, you can be kind, you can even be compassionate, but you cannot be the anchor in a storm that refuses to calm. And if you try, you'll be dragged down with it. Why do some people create drama? Sometimes it's fear of intimacy, of abandonment. Sometimes it's control, because emotional confusion is a powerful manipulation tool. Sometimes it's habit, born from a lifetime of toxic dynamics they never unlearned. But none of those reasons are your responsibility to fix. The Stoic path is not to change her mood. It is to protect your own mind. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Epictetus, you have a choice: to be drawn into every argument, or to step back and observe, to react, or to rise above. So if she's constantly creating chaos, ask yourself, is this what I want my emotional life to feel like? Because love, true love, is not exhausting, it's not reactive. It doesn't keep you in a state of high alert, scanning for the next explosion. True connection is built on peace, on mutual regulation, on the quiet strength of two people who can disagree and still feel safe. If you're not safe, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, it's not a relationship. It's a test you never signed up for. So when the drama doesn't stop, when her storms become your climate, remember this: you're allowed to choose peace. You're allowed to leave the chaos behind. You're allowed to say, this is not love, it's survival. And you were not made to survive someone else's drama. You were made to grow, to lead, and to live from a place of clarity and calm. That is Stoicism in action. Warning sign number 9, constant comparison, the quiet assassination of your self-worth. It starts with a sentence: my ex would never do that. You should be more like James. He's ambitious. Even Sarah's boyfriend always plans something special. At first, it might sound harmless, a passing remark, a throwaway observation. But don't be fooled. This is a crack in the foundation, and if left unchecked, it will grow into a fracture that breaks your sense of self. The Stoics taught us, man is not disturbed by things but by the views he takes of them. Epictetus. And when someone you care about consistently draws comparisons between you and someone else, you begin to see yourself through that distorted lens. You question your value. You start to measure your masculinity, your success, your heart against someone else's shadow. This is the beginning of silent self-betrayal. A high-value man does not compete in a game he did not choose. He defines himself by his principles, not by the projections of someone else's dissatisfaction. So why do some women compare? Sometimes it's to manipulate. Sometimes it's to provoke change through shame. Sometimes it's because they don't know how to communicate what they really want. But whatever the reason, comparison is not love. Comparison is critique in disguise. A woman who truly values you won't weaponize other men's attributes to attack your own. She won't hold up another man's life as a mirror and say, this is who you should have been. Because here's the Stoic truth. You are not here to compete with ghosts. You are not a project. You are not a placeholder. You are not the good enough for now version of someone else's fantasy. You are you. And that is enough for the right person. The danger of comparison lies not just in how it's spoken, but in what it silently erodes: your confidence, your direction, your sense of masculine purpose. A man who lives under the constant pressure of being compared becomes cautious, hesitant, and eventually resentful. And resentment, unspoken, turns into withdrawal. And withdrawal poisons connection. Let's be clear, constructive feedback, that's love. But subtle digs dressed as suggestions, that's control. And repeated comparisons, that's the slow death of admiration. So what do? You don't argue, you don't beg to be seen, you don't fight for a seat at a table that keeps shifting the rules. You speak your truth. Compare me to who I was yesterday, not to someone who isn't me. If she can't accept that, walk, not in anger, but in self-respect. Because the Stoic man does not beg for approval. He builds character, and character doesn't need validation, it commands it. In a world that constantly tells you to be more, do more, look more like him, stand still. Rooted in your values, grounded in your truth. And remember, you are not less just because you are different. You are not inferior just because she lacks clarity. Let others chase the illusion of better. You stay committed to becoming your best. Not his best, yours. Because comparison is the thief of joy. And you were never meant to live in someone else's shadow. Our warning sign number 10, the silent treatment. When she stops answering, she's already left emotionally. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. It lingers, it echoes, and it says everything without saying a word. You've been there. You send a message, you wait. Minutes turn into hours, hours into a day. No reply, no explanation, just silence. And while your mind replays every word you've said, every move you've made, she's moved on to something else, or someone else. Now, don't get this wrong. People get busy, phones die, life happens. But when silence becomes a pattern, when your messages feel like you're screaming into a void, it's no longer about life. It's about priority, and you're no longer one. Stoicism teaches us, if someone values you, they will make the effort. If they don't, they won't. That's it. A woman invested in you doesn't leave you in limbo. She doesn't ghost you in the middle of connection and call it space. She doesn't use silence to punish, manipulate, or withdraw emotionally while keeping you on standby. This is not communication. This is emotional control. You are not a backup plan. You are not a last resort. You are not an option to be picked up when convenient. A Stoic man recognizes this. He doesn't chase where he's ignored. He doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't decode mixed signals like they're sacred scriptures. He observes, he understands, and he acts accordingly. Because in any relationship, romantic or otherwise, communication is the lifeblood. When it dies, so does trust, so does intimacy, so does respect. Let's be brutally honest. Delayed replies, one-word answers, seen but not responded. Weeks of ghosting followed by casual returns like nothing happened. These aren't signs of affection. These are symptoms of disconnection. And you deserve better. You deserve presence. You deserve clarity. You deserve someone who treats your time, your words, and your emotions with respect. But what if she says, I'm just not good at texting. I needed time to think. I didn't know what to say. Understandable once, maybe even twice, but not consistently. Silence, when chronic, isn't about confusion, it's about avoidance. And a man who tolerates being ignored begins to doubt his own worth. He internalizes rejection. He tiptoes around her emotions. He lives in the shadow of uncertainty. But the Stoics remind us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca. Don't let your mind create stories where there's only neglect. Don't romanticize silence. Don't fill in the blanks for someone who leaves you guessing. The truth is simple. If she wanted to talk to you, she would. If she respected you, she wouldn't leave you hanging. If she valued the connection, she'd protect it. And if she doesn't, walk away. Not to make a point, not to get a reaction, but to reclaim your emotional dignity. Because in the end, silence speaks volumes, and sometimes it's telling you the most honest thing she never had the courage to say, I'm no longer here. And that's okay. Because the Stoic path isn't about forcing relationships. It's about cultivating peace clarity, and presence. If she removes herself from the conversation, you don't chase. You close the door gently and keep walking forward. A man who lives by principle doesn't wait for texts. He waits for mutuality. He waits for truth. He waits for someone who values what he offers. Until then, let silence have the final word, and let your self-respect be the loudest response. The end is not the end. It's the beginning of self-respect. You've heard the signs. You've seen the patterns. And now, it's time to decide who you want to be. A man who begs for attention, or a man who commands respect. Too many men stay in relationships long after they've expired, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of the unknown. But what the Stoics knew, what Marcus Aurelius lived by, was this: the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And when your thoughts revolve around pleasing someone who disrespects you, when your self-worth hangs on late replies, cold stares, or passive aggression, you're not in a relationship. You're in a cage. And the worst part, you're holding the key. She may have lost interest. She may have become cold, critical, manipulative, distant. But you still have a choice to protect your dignity, a choice to reclaim your time, a choice to walk away, not in anger, but in power. Stoicism teaches us this unshakable truth. You cannot control how others feel, what they say, or what they do, but you can always control how you respond. You can choose silence over conflict, clarity over confusion, peace over chaos. And most importantly, you can choose yourself. Because here's what happens when you walk away from the wrong person. You walk back toward the man you were always meant to be, focused, resilient, principled, unafraid to say, "This is not worthy of me." Let me be clear. This isn't about hating her. This isn't about punishing her. It's about liberating yourself. You're not here to be someone's emotional punching bag. You're not here to beg for crumbs of attention. You're here to build a life of meaning, peace, and inner strength. And no woman, no matter how beautiful, charming, or passionate, is worth sacrificing your self-respect. So the next time she says something that cuts deep, that makes you question your worth, doubt your value, or feel like you're not enough, remember this: you are enough. Not because someone says so, but because you've chosen to be. In this life, you will encounter many women. Some will admire you, some will test you, and some will slowly, subtly try to destroy you from within. It is not your job to fix them. It is your job to fix your boundaries. The Stoic does not cling. He does not chase. He does not compromise his values for temporary comfort. He walks away when his soul is being drained. He stands still when the world says run. And he builds a life so full of virtue that the wrong people disqualify themselves without a word. So if she says any of those 10 things, don't fight, don't plead, don't argue, just breathe, then walk. Calm, grounded, stoic. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, just a silent goodbye, followed by the echo of your footsteps heading in the direction of self-worth. That's not the end of the relationship. That's the beginning of your real life. Thank you for walking this path with us today. If this message spoke to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And drop a comment below. What's one sign you'll never ignore again? Because real strength isn't in staying. It's in knowing when to walk away. Stay grounded. Stay stoic. You've got this.